Hello world, and we are back. My name's Kyle Fischl, and this is going to be episode 117 of my poker vlog. For this episode, I'm going to cover a 1-3 $10 bomb pot, my October meetup game at Orange City Racing and Card Club. Before I get into those hands, a quick reminder that my first ever Texas meetup game will be held at Georgetown Poker Club, November 17th to the 20th. Hope to see you there if you're in the area. And also, I've been doing some streams, practicing some online cash games. If you'd like to see me on more of a every hand basis, you definitely should check one of those out.
I don't even know what it means, but whatever. Wow. 3-bet sixes and get a 6.
And without further ado, let's roll the tape.
We arrive at our October meetup game. 1-3 $10 bomb pot, $500 max buy-in, so that's what I buy in for. And on the first hand of note, the under the gun player makes it $15. There's one caller. I call on the button with Jack 10 of clubs. Hand plays fine multi-way, so happy to play it in position. So we are 3 ways to a flop of Jack 5 rainbow. Great board for me. When it checks to me, I don't expect my opponents to have pretty much anything, so there's very little I can get value from. So I decided to check this one back in hopes my opponents can catch up. When the turn's the 5 of spades, and it checks to me a second time, I have to go for some level of value, so I guess I'm going to go really small here. I suppose I would bluff with some ace highs the same way. If I think my opponent's completely missed, and will just fold to any size bet, I can bet small sometimes. But I bet $10, hoping to get a crying call out of any of my opponent's holdings. The under the gun player is the only caller, and when the river is the ace of spades. When my opponent checks to me, I think I have to go relatively big here. Hopefully it looks like I'm trying to buy it if he has nothing. If he has like king, queen, maybe he'll talk himself into a call for the chop. Additionally, if my opponent somehow has a 5, I'm getting paid anyway. So I bet $50. And my opponent thinks for a very long time before eventually letting it go. So couldn't get paid on this one, but it's alright. We'll move on to the next one. I'm under the gun with pocket 10s. I raise to $15. There are 3 callers, 2 later position, 1 big blind. So we're going 4 ways to a flop of queen 8-7, 2 hearts. When it checks to me, I'm not going to check this one back. I can get value from heart draws, straight draws, and with only 1 overcard, I'm not too worried about any of my opponents having a queen. So I continue for $30. The 2 later position players decide to fold, and the blind decides to call. So best case scenario, I get to retain the betting lead and get to play in position. When the turn is the ace of hearts, my opponent checks to me a second time. This is going to be one of those times where I turn my hand to a bluff. I think I would c-bet ace X a lot of the time. If I turned an ace, I would size up. Hopefully, I can use this as a bluff, get a queen X to fold, and if my opponent happens to have made hearts, hopefully I can just retain the betting lead and check back rivers. So I'm going to continue to bet this turn. I bet $55. My opponent makes the call again. And when the river is the 8 of diamonds, I suppose there's an argument for bluffing here. Maybe a flush is super scared of a paired board, but I'd say pretty unlikely. Maybe a queen X would fold, as an 8 is definitely now a scare card for them. But when my opponent checks to me, I think I just have enough showdown value to check back. If my opponent had an 8 himself, he's never folding on this particular run out. But luckily for me, my opponent had pocket 5s. So I guess he was disbelieving, plus picked up a flush draw. So either way, good result for me. Think we got max value on this hand. I win another small one before I button straddle. Under the gun raises to 40. I call. Ace-7 of spades, not really a premium, but I think strong enough to be able to defend a straddle. The big blind decides to fold, so we are heads up to a flop of 10-9-8 rainbow. 1 spade. Pretty good board for me. This definitely smacks a caller's range over an opener's range a lot harder. So when my opponent checks to me, and that point specifically, I'm definitely going to size up here. I have all the 2 pairs, all the straights, all the pair plus straight draws, and even just my hand of an open-ended. So I decide on a $60 wager on this flop. When my opponent calls, definitely hoping to pick up backdoor spades or just make my hand. 3 of clubs is definitely the wrong black card I wanted. But I'm not going to slow down here. Same logic. My opponent could peel one with ace X, maybe ace jack, things such as that. And they might fold to a second barrel, as I do have all the 2 pairs still in range. So I bet $85. My opponent tanks for an extremely long time. The longer he takes, the weaker I feel. It's just encouraging me even more to throw out this river bluff if he does eventually make the call. And when he does, preparing to fire as a bluff The 6 of clubs means I no longer have to do that. I can now just go all in and have it. Possible my opponent has jacks through kings and just got super sticky with it. If they felt like they were ahead on the first 2 streets, they really should probably feel committed by this river, but either way, I put my opponent all in for approximately $200 effective, and after approximately a minute of him thinking, he eventually lets it go. So good fold, definitely had the winner on this one. Next interesting hand. I'm in the cutoff. When it folds to me, I make it $15. The button and both blinds call, so we're 4 ways to a flop of king 9-6 rainbow. Definitely a good board for me. When it checks to me, I bet $25, and everyone quickly folds. This is how poker sessions typically go. Just like to sprinkle in a few of the more common hands for a bit of realism in these vlogs. Before we arrive at the next hand of note, on a $10 bomb pot, I have 5 deuce offsuit, so definitely just gonna let this one go until the flop is king 5-5. So definitely happy with this development of the bomb pot. I check as my kicker's not good. I'm either way ahead or way behind, and it checks all the way to the button, who bets $25. Definitely kind of a weak feeler bet, so never going anywhere right now. I make the call. Then the cutoff check raises to 150.
Do you really think he has a chance?
Well, in bomb pots, I do think players have the propensity to overvalue their hands. A hand like king, queen, king, jack might play the exact same way. I'd say pocket kings is pretty unlikely, and maybe this opponent's just making a move with a middling pocket pair. But additionally, the king specifically on board makes this an easier call for me. Because it's a bomb pot, my opponent could have like 5-8, 5-10, all kinds of stuff. Where there's plenty of runouts where we'll just chop even when I'm against a better 5. But realistically, I'm not folding trips anyway. So I make the call. Unfortunately, my opponent has ace-5. So there'll be no chop opportunities on this one, apart from a king or a jack. Pair the board dealer. Nope, 10 of spades. And we double a player up. Trips over trips. On the next hand of note, with 1 limp, I raise to $15 with ace-king offsuit. Well, late position player calls, both blinds call, and the limper calls as well, so we're going 5 ways to a flop of king-king-9, 2 diamonds. When it checks to me, I'm definitely going to keep betting here. Top trips, top kicker is excellent. Plenty of straight draws, plenty of flush draws that can pay me off. But similarly to the last hand, I'm likely way ahead here of any other trips and 9x and all kinds of stuff, so I don't have to bet too big. I only bet $25. Only the late position player decides to call, so we're heads up to a turn card, which is the queen of clubs. Although jack 10 gets there, I'm not too concerned about that. Definitely not going to slow down here. King queen, another possibility, but not sure this opponent wouldn't raise if he had trips with so many players left up act behind him and so many draws out there. Either way, I bet $70. After a bit of thinking, my opponent makes the call. The river is a complete brick, 5 of clubs, so definitely gonna go for some pure value here. Hopefully I'm trips over tripsing a player. Maybe my opponent floated with ace queen or something such as that. I definitely want to go for some value. I bet $110. My opponent thinks for a little bit, lets out a very loud, deep, agonizing sigh before going all in. And on that note, I should have just snap folded. Like, the side jam is just never not the nuts. It just isn't. But I do think this opponent would do the exact same thing, sigh and all, with king jack, king 10, and maybe pocket queens. I don't think a straight is too likely to play this way, so I discount it. And when it's only $250 more to call, and I got trips with the best kicker, beat some of his value, I'm simply not good enough to get away from this hand, so I make the call. And my opponent had king queen. So 2 double ups in a row to the same player. Trips over trips, trips over full house. This opponent definitely has my number today.
Super fun turn card for you.
I had a queen if it makes you feel any better. Cheers.
Following that, with a $10 button straddle, I have king jack of diamonds. The small blind raises to $30, and this has been a really tight player. Has not played very many hands and doesn't really have a big stack, so you could fold this, but for only 20 bucks with a hand as strong as king jack suited, I'm definitely gonna call. When the flop is king 10-6 rainbow, My opponent bets $45, leaving himself only like $50 behind. And flopping top pair, if he has ace, king, or aces, I've just done this to myself. I'm not folding top pair, good kicker to this stack depth, so I just put them all in.
Let them fight.
He makes the call. Turn is a jack, so excellent for me as I just sucked out on ace, king, and the river's an ace. So ace, king resucks. My opponent doesn't immediately show, so I decided to show my cards. And he had ace, queen. Just hit the gut shot jack on me. Even though the ace is definitely live, it still hurt that a player that I perceived as very, very tight got all his money with a gut shot straight draw. And got it.
Reprimand people when you lose. They don't understand. Doesn't make sense. I had a better hand to start with.
Well, the next hand of note. With one limp, I raised to $15 with pocket deuces. Maybe a set can bring me out of this funk. Well, late position player raises to 45. The limper folds. I'm going to call as I'm tilted and just hoping that I can set mine. And we get an excellent flop. 10-8 deuce rainbow. We have a set. Hopefully he has an overpair. Hopefully he bets at it. When I check to him, he unfortunately checks it back. Super disappointed to see that. Turn 3. Definitely have to put some money in the pot. I bet $40 hoping that ace, king, ace, queen just random overs will be unwilling to fold for such a small price, as I don't think he even has a pair. He eventually makes the call. River's a deuce. So we make quads. Super fun to make quads. Super difficult to get paid with quads. But I'm just going to go with the large pot size bet. I don't think my opponent's going to pay me off with ace high all too often unless I completely polarize. And hopefully he can talk his way into a call if he perceives that I'm bluff tilting and spewing all this money around. So I bet $150. My opponent actually thinks for a long time I'm really hoping for a call. Maybe he has like ace 10 and, you know, can't get away from it. But he eventually does fold. Double unfortunate for me is that quads did not qualify for a high hand bonus. I will not be saved by the promotions today. Next interesting hand. I under the gun straddle. With 2 limps, the small blind raised to $35. I make the call. The other 2 limpers call as well. So we're going 4 ways to a flop of ace, king, deuce, rainbow. When the preflop aggressor checks, I think that I can win this pot a high percentage of the time. The limp callers really shouldn't connect with ace, king that well. The preflop aggressor who checked, I think is relegated to like 10s, jacks, queens, things such as that. And I don't think they'll be able to continue for multiple streets. So I throw out a bet of $75, just 100% turning these 6s into a bluff. Both the limp callers fold. However, the preflop aggressor decides to call. So that's disappointing. When turns the queen and my opponent checks to me, I think this is an easy check back spot. I do think my opponent has pocket queens in his range. If so, he's never folding. So I check with intentions of giving up on this one. When the river's a 7, it really doesn't change anything with the board. But my opponent checks to me a 3rd time. I think it's pretty clear my opponent has marginal showdown value at this point. I'm hoping a bet can get a hand like king jack or ace 5 or single pair hands to fold. So I decide to bet. I throw out a bet of $125. Should definitely go a lot bigger with it as I'm, you know, obviously bluffing, trying to get single pairs to fold. But I suppose it's a good thing I didn't because I get absolutely snapped off with ace queen. I do think my bluff works some of the time when my opponent is a little less strong than 2 high pairs, but this time just happened to run into it and get caught in the... And a final hand of note. We look down at pocket kings. Finally, it is time to turn the session around. The big blind raises to 20. There are 2 callers. What an excellent development. I have pocket kings. I have to go huge with it. Let's build a pot. Let's get stacks in. Let's get it all in pre. All of these are fine. So I raised to $120. My image is crap. People should call me with very weak holdings. Well, only the initial raiser decides to call. So we're going heads up to a flop of 6-5-3 rainbow. When my opponent checks to me, this is absolutely a horrible flop for me. This opponent specifically loves playing small suited connectors. He actually, even when it's 120 pre, has all the 2 pairs in range, all the sets, all the pair plus straight draws. So I'm actually not certain that I even have the best hand at this point. So I'm just going to check this one back, hopefully control the pot a little bit. When it turns to jack, I'm hoping he throws out a bet here. I think that would indicate that he has a pair of jacks and I could possibly have the best hand. But when he checks to me, I just decide that I'd like to take my hand to showdown as cheaply as possible. just not feeling great about it. When the river's a 7, my opponent bets $75.
What are you doing?
I have to see this.
And if he has a random 2 pair, I'm happy that I kept it small. But he does also have the ability to bluff when he doesn't have anything and he senses weakness. So I'm definitely calling on this one. And he flips over Jack 4. When I first see it, I think that I've actually won. Just he valued a pair of jacks and I win. But turns out the 4 is the only relevant card on this one. For this hand specifically, I'm really not even upset about how I played it. I very much doubt Jack 4 would fold to a single C bet on this particular flop. Turn being a jack, it's 100% not folding, and river just makes me somewhat victim to the run out. So possibly save some money on this one. Either way, not a good session for me. On this October meetup game, I distribute $1,120 to the wonderful people that showed up across 7 hours, which equated to $160 an hour or 53 big blinds an hour.
Yeah, this session I definitely ran into it a few times. You know, completely doubling opponents 3 different times is definitely going to be difficult to be successful with. And then when things aren't going your way, you just start making mistakes, bad bluff attempts, you know, no value with kings, things like that. But either way, I'm sure we can turn it around.
Nature always has a wheel balancing itself.
I will see you all on the next one. Thank you.